Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 52 of our reading of Rod Serling's Twilight Zone, 26 Unforgettable Explorations into the Realm of Supernatural, adapted by Walter B. Gibson. Now we are going to go over the copyright information, which is as follows. You find it in the book, which is right here. Okay. Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone is copyright 1963 by Cayuga Productions Incorporated, and Rod Serling's Twilight Zone Revisited is copyright 1964 by Cayuga Productions Incorporated. All rights reserved. This 1983 edition is published by Bonanza Books, distributed by Outlet Book Company Incorporated, and a Random House Company, and the address is there if you want it. This book was previously published as two separate works entitled Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone and Rod Serling's Twilight Zone Revisited, printed and bound in the United States of America, and the Library of Congress information is there. Anyways, the Castles, who owned a pawn shop, ended up finding a genie in a blue bottle. Anyways, they wished for lots of money, but now the Internal Revenue Service says they owe $942,000. And so we're going to see how they get out of that. Okay, we're going to read this. He handed the forms and figures to Arthur, then zipped his case, walked to the door, unlocked it, and went out, closing the door behind him. Edna hurried over and locked it again, only to have Arthur comment grimly. "You did that too late, Edna." Then, staring at the heaps of money, he added, "We gave away $60,000, more or less. Let's hope it was a little less, or we won't have enough left to pay the taxes." That said Edna sorrowfully, "was quite a wish." "You should have reflected longer," the genie told Arthur. "I tried to warn you to be careful, Mr. Castle." "Warn me about what?" "About such things as taxes." "Then why didn't you?" "Because I wasn't familiar with the modern situation. Last time I was released from bondage was during the Middle Ages, when the robber barons simply took money from people by force. I realized when I emerged from my bottle today that I was in a more enlightened era, but still you thought there was a catch to it," interrupted Arthur. "Well, there was, and is, as you saw." "How was I to know?" pleaded the genie. "I'm not all powerful, and I'd never have let myself be bottled up. I can grant wishes to people under certain conditions, but that's all." "I still have two more wishes coming," exclaimed Arthur, suddenly brightening. "Suppose I ask for another $1 million, but specifically that it be after taxes." He turned to Edna questioningly, and she replied in a hysterical tone, No, Arthur. No more money. There might be another catch. Wish for something else. A new store, maybe, with a complete stock. It might burn down an hour after we opened it, before we had time to insure it. A chain of stores, then? They might burn down one after another. I'll wish for success, decided Arthur. He swung to Jean. "How would that be?" It's no go, Mr. Castle." The genie shook his head. "Success is a matter of personal opinion or public acclaim, which makes it an intangible. I grant wishes for tangibles only." "So there's a catch to that, too," declared Arthur glumly. "Here we stand in the middle of this miserable little hawk shop, loaded with money that isn't ours, and the whole world waiting if we only wish for it the right way." He swung suddenly to Edna. "What's happened to us anyway?" While Edna remained silent, the genie replied, "You are emotionally upset, Mr. Castle. I have seen the same thing happen with other persons in your situation. Whatever you wish for, you must be prepared to meet the consequences. That means something dead for sure." "Yeah, that means something dead for sure," Arthur decided. "Something really airtight. Money's no good, business is uncertain, success is out as such. I've got it." He brightened again. "Power. To be a boss, a leader." "Okay. Like what?" asked Edna. "The president of a big corporation?" "Sure," agreed Arthur. "That sounds good. But what if the company went bankrupt, as so many do? That's the point, Edna. It would be better to okay. That's a point, Edna. It would be better to be mayor of a city or a governor of a state and get voted out of office. What would you be then? In hawk, I guess, Arthur conceded glumly. But without a hawk shop, there must be some way to beat this thing. He brightened again, then exclaimed, Of course, all I have to be is the ruler of a whole country who can't be voted out of office. He swung to the genie. How about that? Quite simple, the genie assured him, except it allows too much leeway both in time and space. If you were more specific, I'll give it to you this way, Arthur put in. I want to be the head of a foreign country, who can't be voted out of office. Just keep it within the present century, so it is in my range of knowledge. Go back, say 20 or 30 years, or go ahead 20 or 30. I'll leave that to you, Mr. Genie, right? Right. Is that your exact wish? That's my wish officially. Before Arthur spoke the last word, the pawnshop began to tremble, then to whirl. Arthur Castle was undergoing the experiences of Aladdin, the hero of Arabian Nights, at the time when an obliging genie had transported his entire palace from China to Persia, with everyone on board. But in this case, the similarities applied only to the preliminary stages. Within moments, Arthur was detached from his physical surroundings and was rocketed through time as well as space, leaving the pawnshop far behind, along with the months that were flicking past like solid seconds, adding up to years that were gone in scarcely more than an incredible half minute. When the whirl stopped, but the haze was not quite gone, for Arthur found himself seated at a desk in a stuffy room, far more cramped from the familiar pawn shop. In front of him was an outspread map, which for some reason Arthur was unable to understand, though its markings and letterings were peculiar. A man was speaking from across the desk in a language that also should have been unfamiliar, but somehow seemed to translate itself into English as its words drilled through Arthur's brain. My apologies, sir, the speaker was saying, but the situation is just as I described it. The first Ukrainian army has cut us off from the south. They are in Berlin now. There is no sign of the reserve division that we ordered. According to the latest report, there is no reserve divisions. Arthur looked up from the map and studied the speaker, a burly, broad-faced man with a stubby beard and haggard, nervous eyes. The man was wearing a disheveled gray uniform with an army cap to match. And what impressed Arthur most, indeed about shocked him, was the emblem that appeared both on the officer's cap and the armband, the emblem of a Nazi swastika. We are doomed, the officer strained. His voice was rising. There is no hope for us now. No more hope, you understand. From now on, it is just mass suicide. The officer's face was distorted, and his final word became a frantic scream. Well, what about it, mein Führer? The title Führer was a shocker that brought Arthur Castle bolt upright. While he waited for the Nazi officer to say more, he heard other sounds more distant and muffled, but more graphic than words. Those were the sounds of dull explosions from bursting bombs and heavy artillery shells with those ominous overtones. Arthur could feel the cramped room quiver. Mechanically, he pushed himself up from the desk, came around it, pressed the officer aside, and moved numbly towards the mirror on the wall. My third wish, Arthur muttered. I wanted to be the head of a country, someone who couldn't be voted out of office. That's what I wanted to be. He looked into the mirror. Instead of his own smooth-shaven features and thinning, unkempt hair, he saw a face just as gaunt and hollowed, but one that wore a toothbrush mustache and was topped by slicked down hair. Now Arthur's voice became a scream. That's what I wanted to be, and that's what I am. I'm Hitler. I'm in a bunker. It's the end of the war, and it's the end of me. Timed to that shrill protest pronouncement, the door to the bunker room opened, and another Nazi officer entered. He stepped to Arthur's side, placed a glass vial in his hand, and announced in a monotone. Announced in monotone. Here's what you asked for, mein Führer. Very quickly and very painless. We have given another vial to Fräulein Braun, and the other arrangements have been made, as you ordered. The officer stepped back, clicking his heels, and gave the Nazi salute. That was duplicated by the other officer, who was still standing by the table. The two of them went out through the door together, and Arthur heard them speak to someone else. It's almost the end. We've given them the poison. It's their only chance. It's their only choice. We'll come back after they're finished and take the bodies out to the courtyard. The gasoline is waiting there to burn them. The only choice. Arthur Castle heard the door of the bunker close. He looked down at the poison vial in his hand. He looked up to study the mirrored face, and he knew was not his own. He heard a muffled explosion, more forceful than before, because with it the room quivered violently, so violently, in fact, that it reminded Arthur of the way the pawnshop had shuddered when the genie had launched him on his fatal trip back through time and space to this rendezvous with doom. Now Arthur's eyes were again on the vial in his hands. What I'll do with this, he screamed, is what I should have done with that cheap blue bottle that Mrs. Grimley brought into my shop. He turned, raised his hand, and flung the vial on the floor, shouting as he did, I wish that I could be back where it all started, that I could be Arthur Castle again, just as I was. The room quivered under a heavier bomb burst, almost as though the smashing of the vial had caused it. Again, everything began to whirl. Arthur reeled around behind the desk, slumped there, propping his elbow on the map, which faded, and all its mixed up names and markings, until Arthur, in his profound but happy amazement, found himself staring down at the counter in his own pawn shop, which somehow had ceased its whirl and was back to normal, or not quite normal. There on the floor beyond the corner, in that space which not too long ago had teemed with stacks of green, instead of the vanished wealth, lay something that Arthur Castle was happier to see: the fragments of a broken blue bottle. I'm here, a four-time loser. Arthur looked up to see Edna staring numbly. So you're here too. Arthur looked around. But where is he? You know who I mean, don't, or do you? Edna's solemn nod proved that she was thinking of the genie too. Arthur picked up a broom and dustpan and swept up the broken fragments of the bottle. He was awkward with the broom, for as he poked the handle back over his shoulder, he heard a sharp cracking sound. Arthur turned to see the showcase broken, as it had been before Mrs. Grumley had walked in with the blue bottle. But now, as Arthur glanced again at the dustpan, there lay the bottle, no longer broken but intact, even to the glass stopper and dried wax seal. Edna stepped forward, took the dustpan, and indicated the bottle with a sweep of her hand, and she announced, I'll put this back in the trash can where it belongs, and can stay there for the next 101 years. Then gasped Arthur. You know all that happened, and you believe it. I believe it. I believe all I saw, and I'll take your word for the rest. You wished yourself somewhere, and all of a sudden you are gone. Then you must have wished yourself back, for here you are, and I am so very glad. Arthur's face lighted with an appreciative smile. I think I'll stop wishing for a while, Edna. I can't afford a brand new life. I'll give the old one a new paint job. Arthur, I think that's a very good idea. For a while, Edna, I thought that this place was crawling with money, but it's all gone, back where it belonged, and all the worries that came with it. I know, Arthur. Maybe we should worry along our oh, maybe we should worry along our own way without a lot of without a lot of wishful thinking. With that, Edna went on through the door to the street, but she was back in a few minutes later, triumphantly displaying an empty dustpan. Arthur's smile widened. Castle's pawn shop was back in business, this time to stay thanks to the lessons its proprietor had learned from their brief trip into the mystic realm known as the Twilight Zone. And now we're ready for the mirror image. The mirror image. Give me just a sec here. The man in the bottle and the mirror image. Okay, we're got it. Okay. Okay, it says here, the mirror image. The cold November rain was beating at the big front window of the city bus terminal, blurring the dim lights along the street and the driveway. It was as if a grim black night had gathered the building in its all-enveloping folds, turning the terminal into a small, detached world of its own. On a night as bad for travel as this, the place was almost deserted. Ticket office, baggage room, lunch counter, all were staying open only because they usually did, until the last bus arrived. Tonight, however, prospective passengers were very late. There was an elderly couple seated on a wooden bench at one end of the terminal, and a girl in her early 20s at the other. The girl's name was Millicent Barnes, and she was fidgety enough to make up for a whole busload of passengers. She kept looking at her wristwatch and comparing it with the big clock over the door. She looked at the ticket window where a complacent ticket agent was reading a magazine, then at the baggage room, which was well deserted, and finally to the lunch counter, where a patient middle-aged woman was putting things in order for the next day. Millicent's own patience must have reached its limit, for suddenly she arose, walked over to the ticket window, and wrapped its grating to rouse the agent's attention. As he looked up, Millicent asked crisply, The bus to Cortland? It was due half an hour ago. When will it be in? She'll be in when she'll be in. The agent laid his magazine aside and gave the girl a fixed stare. I told you that last time you asked, and the time before. Why, the only time I've asked is right now, exclaimed Millicent. All I want is a civil answer from you. She broke off abruptly, staring into the baggage room, which connected with the ticket office. There by itself was a bright blue suitcase with brass trim, somewhat the worse for wear, as indicated by the taped handle. Millicent swung about, staring back at the bench that she had just left. There was her own bag, identical in every detail, even to the taped handle, and a red baggage stub attached to it. Millicent started toward the bench, then pressed her hand to her eyes, turned around, and went back to the ticket window, where the agent said caustically, Well, shall we run through it all again? I want to know about that suitcase, returned Millicent. The one in the baggage room. It looks just like mine. And why shouldn't it? It is yours. You checked it in just a little while ago. But it can't be my bag. That's mine over there. Millicent turned, gesturing the bench, only to break off again. There was no bag there. Now the ticket agent was mingling sarcasm with a bit of sympathy. Why don't you go over there and sit down, miss? You're walking in your sleep, or you're seeing things, or something. Just rest quiet and let me read my magazine. When the Cortland bus comes in, you'll hear a big roar from the motor, and you'll see people walk in through that door. Then you'll know the bus is ready. But I remember checking, but I can't remember checking my bag. Somewhat dazed, Millicent walked back to the bench and went over to the lunch counter, where she sat down and stared vacantly until the counter woman asked, "Are you all right, miss?" "Why, yes," Millicent studied her reflection in a mirror behind the counter. "Don't I look well?" "You look fine, honey," the woman replied, "but you sat down and stared the same way when you came over here before." "But, oh, why, I wasn't here before," Millicent exclaimed. "What is this? I checked my bag without knowing it. I'm told I asked questions before about the bus. Now you tell me." Millicent's thoughts broke off in the light of stern reality. While staring in the mirror, she had let her gaze revert to the reflection of the bench to make sure that her suitcase wasn't returned there. It hadn't, but she had. There, seated where she had been a short time before, Millicent saw the mirrored image of a girl who was her identical twin. Either that or Millicent had become someone else and was looking back at her old self of 10 minutes before. "What can I get you, honey?" the counter woman asked. The counter woman's voice was worried. "A glass of water? A cup of coffee? Maybe a cold cloth or an aspirin?" Millicent shook her head as she clutched the counter to keep from falling off the stool. From an angle, she could only see her own face in the mirror, and it was very white, but the coldness of the counter revived her enough to wrench her full about and stare at the actual bench. Her double was gone, but the suitcase was there. Unsteadily, Millicent walked to the bench, keeping her eye on the suitcase all the way. As she sat down, she pressed her hand on the bag to make sure it was really there. She gave a challenging look at the ticket window, and the agent looked up from his magazine to return a knowing smile. Millicent arose, took a few compulsive steps toward the window, then decided to avoid another argument there. If the ticket agent had seen Millicent's double, he might try to confuse her more. What Millicent wanted now was some witness to her, in her behalf, so she turned her steps to the other end of the waiting room and approached the elderly couple seated there. The man was dozing, but the woman was awake. "I was wondering," said Millicent, "if you saw someone sitting in my seat only a few minutes ago." "Why, I don't think so, miss," the woman replied. "Of course, I wasn't particularly looking in that direction." The elderly man heard the voices and awoke with a sudden start. Curiously, he asked, "Has something happened? Is there any trouble?" "No trouble," Millicent smoothed the situation hurriedly. "I thought I saw someone I knew. I'm sorry to disturb you." She went back past the ticket window, noting her own suitcase still by the bench. She was ready to have it out with the ticket guy, but first she threw a sharp glance at the baggage room, only to stop short with a double take. The room was empty, with no sign of the duplicate suitcase. "What's happening to me?" Millicent breathed. "Am I having delusions? Am I running a temperature?" She pressed her hand to her forehead. "No, I'm not even warm. No fever." Millicent stiffened, realized that her present actions were making her more conspicuous and perhaps creating new suspicions in the mind of her watchers. She looked toward the door, tempted to rush out into the rain, if only to get a moment of relief from this growing feeling of madness. Right then the door opened and a tall man entered, shaking the rain from his hat brim and bringing an attaché case from the folds of his drenched topcoat. As he walked forward, the man pushed back his hat to reveal a smiling, friendly face. He was about 30 years of age and apparently had traveled extensively, for he appraised the bus terminal in one sweeping glance. He was starting towards the ticket window to make an inquiry there when he suddenly turned towards Millicent, who was already coming to her feet. Your handbag, the man said politely, stooping to pick it up. You just dropped it. Numbly, Millicent realized that dropping a bag containing all her money was worse than forgetting what she had done with a suitcase. But she managed to return the man's smile, and she murmured her thanks. So he asked her for information. We're going to have to finish this later. We have been reading from Rod Serling's Twilight Zone, 26 Unforgettable Explorations into the Realm of the Supernatural, adapted by Walter B. Gibson, and specifically The Mirror Image is the story we've been reading. If you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, if you want to support me in any way, if you want to join the Discord server, all the information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.